After a week of high tension and intense debate across the UK, following the prosecution of the murderer of Henry Nowak, the Bylines Network talks to prominent Sikh MP Tan Dhesi. In a revealing and powerful interview, Mr. Dhesi expresses his deepest sympathies for the Nowak family's loss and discusses faith, values, justice, and why the actions of one person must not be exploited by the extreme right-wing forces seeking to disrupt and divide our communities. I hope you all find this interview interesting, given by our Managing Director, Ben Dickinson, speaking to Tan Dhesi MP.
Tan, thank you for joining us. For all of our listeners listening to the Bylines Network podcast, we're talking to Tan Dhesi, who is the MP for Slough and chair of the Defence Committee. And we're talking to you in an interesting couple of weeks, particularly for the person who was the first Sikh MP. I know there are more now, which you've laid a path and blazed a path for other people. So I suppose perhaps a starting point, how have the last couple of weeks been after the incidents on the south coast in Southampton and the debates in Parliament? And I guess particularly, tell us what you said in your speech, because what we saw as the public on many broadcasters was the start of your speech, you getting interrupted and then not the end of it. So it would be great to know the fullness of what you said.
Yeah, Ben, first of all, I was deeply saddened by the brutal murder of Henry Nowak, and that's how I started off my remarks in Parliament as well. And indeed, my heartfelt condolences to the Nowak family, and their pain, their grief was exacerbated by the police wrongly handcuffing Henry because unfortunately they'd been taken in by the lies of the murderer and some members of his family. And that actually stripped poor Henry of his dignity in his last agonizing moments. And that's something that should never be allowed to happen again. But at the same time, what was also very, very galling for me is how the likes of Reform, Restore, and others on the far right decided to politicize people's pain. They decided to scapegoat and throw under the bus an entire community, the British Sikh community, for the actions of one individual. And for us, for them to call for a ban on the kirpan, that's the Sikh small ceremonial blade, that also was very, very galling, because for well over a century, Sikhs have been proudly wearing not just their turban, but also for the baptized Sikhs, they've been wearing the kirpan, these small ceremonial sword. That's something that was really, really disappointing, because the disinformation around this, the kirpan wasn't actually used in the murder. What the murderer used was a very lethal, long, large blade, about 8 inches long. It's called the pesh kabz. It was an Indo-Persian blade that was used, and the lethality of that weapon, by the way, which used to be used in battles, in wars centuries ago, it was designed to maximize internal bleeding. That's why poor Henry didn't actually stand a chance. But the whole debate, the way it was characterized by those on the far right, they tried, despite the very dignified, the remarks of Mr. Nowak, the family, that they did not want Henry's death to be used to create further division or hatred or tension. That's exactly what some unscrupulous individuals did.
Absolutely. And thank you for the whole of that wider context and history as well. So I think that's really important and a really kind of balanced view of it, and really important for people to hear everyone, I think, start with that perspective of grief and shock and sadness and reaching out to that family. And shocking indeed that some don't start with that, because surely the death of an individual and the legacy that leaves is a paramount in the whole situation. I'm interested though in one of the other impacts, I suppose, which is perhaps how the Sikh community as a whole might feel now. The community in Southampton's been there since the 1840s. I mean, it's not a new community there at all. You mentioned for over 100 years, people wearing the turban in this country, for example. That's significant. We have citizen journalists based in that area who have talked about a changed environment, being afraid to go out over that weekend. People from all different backgrounds, actually, not just one. So, how does that feel in your perception to Sikh communities right now across the UK, or perhaps in that area, if you know?
Yeah, Ben, well, that's another thing that I asked of the Home Secretary on the floor of the House, is that I said the community, the British Sikh community, which not only is shocked by this brutal murder, they're also ashamed because someone who purported to be of the Sikh faith with a visible Sikh identity has been the one that has perpetrated this crime. So that's why there's that sense of shame, that how could somebody from our community have perpetrated something as heinous as this. And then also I said, look, it's a community that is very fearful because there has been a rise in anti-Sikh hate crime. And that's something that is especially on the streets of Southampton, but elsewhere as well. We have seen shocking incidents of anti-Sikh hate crime, and that's why I said the community is looking for reassurances from the Home Secretary, from the government, that they will still be able to freely and peacefully practice their faith. And in terms of how the community has conducted itself, as you rightly noted, for well over a century, the Sikhs have resided within Great Britain very peacefully. In fact, they've made a huge positive contribution to British society and the British way of life. If we look at the last census, for example, the largest number from any community in terms of home ownership, proportionately, are the British Sikh community. The second highest number in terms of graduates, proportionally, of any community. So there's a huge push on education, just like my parents did with me, many others, that look, you've got to get educated, you've got to have that strong work ethic, you've got to conduct yourself very well within society. And the Sikh community is actually very integrated into the wider British society. And as I called out the likes of Reform and Restore, I said, you guys actually need a brief history lesson, that hundreds of thousands of Sikh soldiers fought bravely alongside British troops, and tens of thousands of them made the ultimate sacrifice, actually died on the battlefield for the freedom of this country, and they did so proudly wearing their turban and their kirpan. And look, Ben, this is something that's often lost, that many people, there was a shock, we didn't even know that Sikhs were allowed to carry a kirpan, this small ceremonial sword. And I said, well, that actually corroborates what many of us have been saying. How many incidents have there been of the kirpan being used dangerously, offensively? 4/5 and now 4. And these individuals have made one incident where the kirpan wasn't actually used into something that they tried to portray, not just something against the police, and then they made accusations against the police, but it was also against one community, that they wanted to stop them from being able to freely practice their faith. And that's why there's a lot of fear and a lot of concern around. And I thought that that's exactly what the British Sikh community, they were looking for someone to be able to take a stand and face up to these individuals who are looking to divide communities. And as I said to them, don't worry, we see you, and we are strong enough to fight against that, because we're not just going to stand aside while you engage in your disinformation and misinformation, and try, despite the wishes of the Novak family, trying to instigate riots or trying to get increased tension. We had the likes of Nigel Farage calling for pure cold rage. No, you don't need rage at this moment. What you need is for the community to come together to help a grieving family and to tackle the scourge of knife crime, because that individual, like I said, for many individuals, perhaps some of our young people, for them it's about being one of the gangsters, or just to try to have dangerous knives and guns and other weapons. We need to tackle that issue, and that's something that I have been serving in Parliament as the MP for Slough over the last 9 years. I know that the likes of me have been engaged in various debates talking about knife crime, whether it was under the previous Conservative-led governments, whether it's now under the Labour government, that we need more resources for the police, for youth hubs, the youth centres, who actually all those that experience well over £1 billion worth of cuts meant that many young people didn't have the platform. They didn't have places where they could come in and enjoy each other's company, but also to have that as a platform to actually harness their full potential. So we needed more investment in preventative measures, but also to ensure that we adequately resource the police as well in their efforts.
Minded that there's a very significant by-election happening in Wigan, in Makefield at the moment, and that the area that Andy Burnham was in this morning, for example, is an area where knife crime has gone down significantly, and some would argue because of some of those measures. So I suppose I'm interested in whether you felt you got the answer you wanted from the Home Secretary, and also what you feel about the government's response generally to the fallout for Southampton. The messages you're giving are really clear, and they come from arguably, even though there are more Sikh MPs than there were, arguably a unique place in our parliamentary and political picture, somebody who understands that cultural and historical perspective from personal experience, but also understands and chairs a major committee in Parliament. So do you feel that message and those kind of lessons are getting through? Are you happy with the response, wider response so far?
We've been raising the issue of knife crime again and again. By the way, I too was in Makerfield recently to campaign there. And it has been good to see that in various areas where the Labour government has taken action, trying its best to recruit more policing and neighbourhood officers, putting more money into youth clubs, into youth centres. All of that is incredibly important. But as far as the community was concerned, at least they heard from the Home Secretary that, look, we are not looking to ban the Kirpan. We are not looking to stigmatise and to blame an entire community for the actions of one individual. And, that's exactly what the community was looking for, because I think also it showed them the value of a Labour government that is being sensible, that's looking to bring people together, that's not looking to use an incident of such pain and such grief to create hatred and division. And that's what I would request the government to do, is to make sure that they are working with all communities to ensure that everybody is able to freely practice their faith. But at the same time, we need to tackle the wider issue around knife crime, or whether that's the increase as we've experienced over recent years in terms of violent crime. There have been issues around mental health provision for many individuals, especially young people. The government has embarked on recruiting 6,500 mental health nurses. That all of that is very, very important, because we've got to take this holistically. But at the same time, we need to be aware as a society of those that are unscrupulous in the way that they are going about every single thing. Either is to blame the immigrants, or is to blame minorities, or is to blame migrants. Previously, the likes of Reform and others were busy blaming the Muslim community for various things. I remember after the horrific murders of those three young girls in Southport, how certain individuals engaged in racist riots, trying to burn down migrant hotels. There's been a lot that's been happening in our community that we just need to take a very considered view on, and the government needs to take action to not just call out such nefarious activity in terms of those that are trying to instigate riots, but also to have long-term measures that ensures that nobody is left behind and that everybody can coexist peacefully, and that we have progress and growth in the country.
Because interesting reflection there. Two questions, but first is about where we are now compared to 2024. You mentioned those riots in 2024, and I'm speaking to you from the northeast of England, and at the time was working and running an organisation that was based in the Tees Valley. Middlesbrough was a key site. I can remember the deep impact on our staff of all different backgrounds, the fear that people experienced, and on the people that used the services that we ran. But we're 2 years on. Labour government had been in power weeks when that situation, the Southport situation and the fallout from it occurred. Are we in a better place now to prevent? I mean, the rain may have made a difference. The weather always makes a difference, that the police will tell you. But are we in a different position now to prevent, some of that Tommy Robinson flying down to Southampton and whipping up, some of that? So are we in a position to prevent that spreading this time, do you think? Is it a different situation, or do we need to do more?
Well, look, after the racist riots and the Islamophobic riots, post the horrific murders in Southport, the government did take strong action. Originally, I think everybody was just shell-shocked at how this tragedy was being used by certain individuals to create such huge vandalism and the division that was going on then. But finally, the government did move in, and they moved in hard, and that's exactly what was needed. And I did commend the Prime Minister and the government on that occasion, that's what was needed in order that the vast majority of our society, which is peaceful, law-abiding, they don't want to be seeing all of this on their streets. In fact, they want peaceful coexistence. And this time round, we haven't seen the extent of the scenes that we witnessed post Southport, but we must remain vigilant, because those that are seeking to divide will just pick up on any incident. We've had another horrific attack in Belfast, and I know that the full details of that will gradually become apparent to all of us, but we just need to remain vigilant in the sense that an actions of one individual cannot be used to create that hatred and division in the entire town or city or wider country. So a lot of work has been done, but lots more needs to be done yet.
So I'm interested in, it's my second question on this really, is that fascinated and heartened, I think a lot of people were, by the response of yourself, the quick response from national leaders of the Sikh community in the same kind of language and tone that you present today, grief, sharing the grief of the family and respecting their wishes, and also talking about the wider social context in a really meaningful way. And you talk about that integration, that history, that contribution that Sikhs have made to British society. Are there lessons in Sikhism itself that could help us with confronting some of those divisions that others would like to exploit?
Look, first of all, the community, as you rightly said, was quick to condemn the murderer. In fact, by the way, something else, Ben, that a lot of people might not be aware, the murderer was actually evicted banned from his local Sikh Gurdwara. So that the Sikh temple in Southampton, and they had flagged up with the authorities the violent nature of the individual, and they stopped him from coming and intimidating anybody in that Sikh place of worship. So that is a matter of record. This was several months before, what actually occurred in Southampton in terms of Henry Nowak's murder. So that's the first thing. And secondly, the community, they've been actually holding prayers. There've been vigils for Henry, because people were just so shell shocked that this had happened. They wanted to show that solidarity with the Novak family. And also, as I said on the media round straight after the day of the sentencing as well, that we want to make sure that we pay gratitude to the Novak family. The grace, the poise with which his father conducted himself. Some of us were listening intently to his every single word. And the way that he said, look, I want the community to unite. I don't want this to be misused, the tragedy that has befell our family, to create hatred or division or tension. And that's something I think that all of us can learn a great deal from. In terms of Sikh values, the values of sharing with others, that's something that the Sikh Gurdwaras, the community, we saw that during the COVID crisis. We saw that when we had floods in the southwest and other parts of the country. The Sikh community were always at the forefront of providing free meals, going out there, helping the wider community, because that's what is ingrained within the Sikh faith. And something else that I wanted to point out as well, Ben, that others have wrongly try to paint this as an aspect of gender-based violence, as in violence against women and girls. There have been remarks that have been made by former MPs which couldn't be further from the mark. I just want to make it clear that Sikh women as well as men actually carry the kirpan. That is, it's not just a male only the domain. It literally is thousands of Sikh women and Sikh men, the fully baptized, who carry that kirpan as well. And before they are given those 5Ks, the 5 articles of faith, of which the kirpan is one, that they're told about the aspects of meditation, of discipline, not just discipline in terms of waking up early in the morning at the crack of dawn, to have that strong work ethic, to have cleanliness, and the responsibility that comes with wearing a kirpan. Historically, in previous centuries, when the Gurus ordained that Sikhs should be carrying that, it was a very, very different milieu. It was the Sikhs were undergoing persecution, and the Gurus wanted to make sure that the Sikhs not only defended themselves but defended others, that they were strong and steadfast, that learned Sikh martial arts. So there's a huge warrior tradition within the Sikh community, that hence why the preponderance, the over-representation of Sikhs in the military. I'll give you one stat, for example, is in the British Indian Army, the Sikhs during those colonial times only made up 2% of the Indian population, but they made up 20% of the army. That's why you've got so many Sikhs in the UK, because straight after the Second World War, the government of the day decided that they wanted to initiate what was called a voucher system. So they encouraged, in their drive to rebuild Britain and get the country moving again, they wanted immigration, and they wanted to actually prioritize those people who had served in the armed forces. Hence why now 1% of the UK population is Sikh, because whether it's my grandparents, many others, they came along on a voucher system, and many of them then settled here. There are their primary intention. For many of them, it was to come here for a few years, make some money, and then go back. But then gradually, how things just developed is that they became very embedded within the community. They got a lot of love and respect here, and ultimately they decided to make their life here. And hence why the likes of myself, third generation, I was born and brought up in Britain, very proud to be British, and I want to make sure that we live in a society and that multicultural community where we're not only proud of our own distinct identity as Sikhs, and you talked about the Sikh values, but Sikhs are actually told that you must integrate within the wider community, you must make a positive contribution, and that's how I would request all Sikhs just to keep moving forward as well. So those are the sort of things that I think are important for the Sikh community to learn, but we obviously can learn from one another as well.
It's an important lesson, I think, perhaps for Sikhs to hear it said publicly, because it's perhaps not talked about as much as people know, but for the rest of us as well to learn and understand and realize what a success it is for a multicultural, diverse, modern British society to that journey, that history. I suppose next question then, logically, is what do we need to do to tell those stories more and better? If you had one bit of advice for, I guess our bit is the independent media sector, but for all the media, what would you ask us to do now with or about those stories?
Well, look, it's the responsibility of all of us to learn more about one another. Yeah, that's the only way that we can get rid of misunderstandings, apprehensions, anxieties about one another. That's what makes for a very educated, cultured society. And it's the job not just of the likes of myself as parliamentarians to be making speeches or to be involved in community building, in community cohesion, and to talk about integration. The media, the likes of yourselves, have a hugely important role because you can either get involved in information sharing, or unfortunately, there are some within the media that involve in disinformation, which is what we need to be very, very wary of. Individuals also have a huge responsibility as well. What we share on social media is incredibly important. There is so much disinformation. I know that during my work as a chair of the Defence Committee, I've realised some of the statistics that we've been faced with, that not only is the UK the third most targeted nation on the planet in terms of cyber attacks, there is that staggering statistic that by next year, the majority of information online on the internet will actually contain misinformation and disinformation. So most of the websites, most of the information online. So we've got a job to educate ourselves, to be more aware that we don't just consume a bit of information and then suddenly take that as a truth. We've got to see where is the source. Who's actually saying this, and there's this credible news. But for the media in particular, how you fact check things, how you present them to the wider public is incredibly important as well, because let's face it, most people, they're too busy in their day-to-day life. They haven't got the time to be having every single thing filtered through, and they're fact checking everything. They need somebody to do that for them. So we need trusted organizations like yourselves to engage heavily in that field as well.
Oh, thank you. We interviewed Gavin Esler just for his reflections on where things are at in the media fairly recently, and he talked about the slow death of the trusted guides in the media space and the need for more of them, and trusted guides in the media space and in Parliament too, after what's happened to politics in the last 15, 20 years, and proud to say that we see you as one of those as well, Tan. So thank you so much. I know we're at time now. You played a really important role in this particular debate at this moment, and we're really happy to amplify that with this interview. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. And by the way, I do want to pay the gratitude and give credit to the allies of the Sikh community, because while the Sikh communities, like I said, we see those that are looking to scapegoat an entire community, what's also not been lost on the community is the number of allies that came on social media, on media, to say, no, look, you can't be doing this. This is completely wrong. We, like the British Sikh community, you can't take the actions of one individual and then translate that. The Sikhs have freely practiced their faith and they should be allowed to continue to do so as well. That has been hard fought rights that they have gained over the decades to proudly wear their turban, to wear their kirpan. That is something you cannot imagine, the strength that was given to the community and how that actually leads to greater integration. So well done to the allies that are there as well, because it's not just a job of one community to be battling for themselves. It's also the job of wider society. And that's why we will then have cohesive societies, as if everybody looks out for one another. But an absolute delight, Ben, and thank you for everything that you guys do. And I hope your viewers will have enjoyed our exchange of views today.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you so much for that and for your time. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us for this very special episode of Bylines Reports, listeners. I do hope that you found the interview interesting. Our next episode is going to be about Brexit, as this month has its 10-year anniversary. Until then, enjoy the World Cup, and we'll see you later.